Hey, good morning. I'm Patricia Murphy. It's Thursday. This is Seattle Now. Seattle's very own Soundgarden is the latest inductee into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We'll talk about their legacy and how they led the way for Seattle's grunge scene in the 90s. That's in a minute. But first, let's get you caught up. Katie Wilson has increased her lead over incumbent Seattle Mayor Bruce Harrell by 0.7 percentage points. As of the latest vote drop Wednesday, Wilson has 1,900 more votes than Harrell. The count isn't over. There are still ballots left, and election workers still need to clear more than 1,000 ballots with signature issues. Wilson's team is feeling confident. Mayor Harrell says at noon today he'll make an address to the people of the city of Seattle. The community center pool and play area at Green Lake are going to get a major renovation. Seattle Parks and Rec wants your input online or in person. There's a meeting tonight at 6:30, another one on Saturday at noon. The multi-million-dollar project includes a newly built aquatic facility and community rooms, as well as an updated and relocated play area. The historic Evans Pool building will be repurposed for community use once the new aquatic center is complete. And unionized workers at Starbucks say they'll strike today unless there's a contract offer from the company. Starbucks Workers United members voted overwhelmingly to authorize a strike as they push to secure their first contract. Today's potential strike in 25 cities coincides with Starbucks Red Cup Day. The company said in a statement they're disappointed that Workers United has voted to authorize a strike instead of returning to the bargaining table. Check back for more headlines on tonight's episode of Seattle Now.
Tonight, we make sure that Chris Cornell, Kim Thiel, Hiro Yamamoto, Matt Cameron, and Ben Shepherd go down in history as one of the most majestic, powerful, and influential bands ever to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Long live!
Last weekend, one of Seattle's most influential bands was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Soundgarden helped define the sound of Seattle in the 1990s. Not only that, but they paved the way for the grunge explosion. Seattle Now senior producer Andy Hurst is here to talk about their legacy. Andy, thanks for being here. You're not just a reporter on this show, you're a fan.
Yeah, and I got my flannel, I got my coffee. I'm ready to go.
Awesome. So the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has given their official blessing. Soundgarden rocks. But here in Seattle, we did not need the Rock Hall to tell us that.
No way. We know this, Trish.
Yeah.
We know they rock. Yeah, this is an awesome honor for the band. To be completely upfront here, I am a big fan of Soundgarden. I grew up here in the Seattle area. I was an angsty teen in the 90s. I was inspired by grunge and alternative music to learn how to play guitar. I was in a band in junior high and high school. So the reason, we're talking about Soundgarden today is they were inducted into the Hall of Fame last weekend. Ceremony was down in L.A. Here is original Soundgarden bassist Hiro Yamamoto speaking at the ceremony.
Chris Cornell, we are so missing you tonight on this stage. We all love you, and all love to you, and we would not be here without you. So somewhere there, Chris, we're talking to you, baby.
And for folks who might not be familiar with the band, we should say right off the bat that singer Chris Cornell is no longer with us. He died by suicide in 2017. We're going to talk a lot more about him later in this episode for sure. But Trish, before this conversation is over, I might convince you that Soundgarden is the most interesting Seattle band of the grunge era, and maybe, just maybe, the most important.
Okay, well, I'm open to that suggestion, Andy, because I am a fan, and I still remember the first time I heard Soundgarden as a teenager in my bedroom in New Jersey. Let's talk about how this band got started.
I love thinking about teenage Trish listening to Soundgarden in the 80s. Okay, so they go back further than I think a lot of people realize. They formed in 84.
Wow.
So way before grunge exploded in the early 90s. Guitarist Kim Thiel and bassist Hiro Yamamoto, who we just heard from, they had moved to Seattle from the Chicago area. They met Chris Cornell, who was born and raised here. Cornell was actually the drummer and singer. That did not last for too long. After a few years and a different drummer, those duties went to Matt Cameron.
All right, well, let's talk about Soundgarden's early music. Bad Motorfinger was the first CD I listened to, but that was actually their third release.
Yeah, if you're familiar with Soundgarden's music that broke through to the mainstream, like Black Hole Sun, for example, super popular song, their early stuff is really quite different. Here's how Marco Collins describes their early stuff. Marco was a longtime DJ at 107.7 The End and a really influential figure in the grunge era in Seattle.
Soundgarden was a metal band that still spoke to the punk rock kids. That's how they framed it. And that's what their live shows were like.
So here's the first single they ever released. This is a song called Hunted Down, released by Sub Pop Records in 1987. So it's super raw. It's this kind of chaotic blend of punk and metal that Marco mentioned that sort of came to define the pre-grunge era in the 80s. A lot of people associate Nirvana with Seattle's Sub Pop Records. After all, Sub Pop put out Nirvana's first single and first album. But Soundgarden was the first of the big four grunge bands to release music on Sub Pop.
That is really interesting. You know, you mentioned at the top that Soundgarden might be the most important band to emerge from the Seattle scene. Given their intersection with Nirvana, this makes me curious why you think this could be.
Yeah, here's another first. Soundgarden was, in fact, the first grunge band to be signed to a major record label. They inked a deal with A&M Records in late 1988, and that album, Louder Than Love, came out the following year. I'm going to let author Greg Prado make the case here for their importance. He literally wrote the book on Soundgarden. It's called Dark, Black, and Blue, The Soundgarden Story, which came out in 2019.
I think Soundgarden's place in the history of Seattle rock, or quote-unquote grunge, is huge. I know Kurt Cobain was a big Soundgarden fan. There's photos of him playing a guitar that has a Soundgarden sticker on it. He also placed a ad looking for a drummer in 1988, I think, and one of the bands he listed as being an influence was Soundgarden. Really, they're the most important grunge band to me. I mean, I know that Nirvana was the most successful worldwide, and they're probably the most globally recognizable. But without Soundgarden, I don't know if Nirvana would have been signed to a major label. I don't know if Pearl Jam would have been signed. Soundgarden really kicked down the door, I think, for a lot of the other grunge bands to follow.
Beyond being an important band, how is Soundgarden unique from all the other bands to come out of the Seattle area?
Yeah, I think you've got to start with singer Chris Cornell. I think his voice is pretty incredible, noted for having this huge octave range. He could be sort of low and growly like other singers, but he could also hit this upper register that really kind of pierces through. I think a great example of his vocal range is one of my favorites. Here's a little bit of Outshined. This is from that 1991 album, Bad Motorfinger, the one that you were listening to as a teenager.
All right, Andy, so obviously some powerful vocals from Chris Cornell. What else sets Soundgarden apart musically?
All right, I just got to go through like the rest of the members here, right? So Kim Thayil, awesome guitarist. He used a lot of odd tunings to create sort of this like indecipherable sound. His style is unlike, I think, any other guitarist from the grunge era, in my opinion. And then to use a scientific term, the band's rhythm section kicks ass. Drummer Matt Cameron is my favorite from the grunge era. Bassist Ben Shepherd joined the band after Yamamoto left, and they created this like throbbing, pulsating backbone of the band. Soundgarden would also use these odd time signatures like 5/4. Most music is in 4/4. Soundgarden would frequently break out of that convention. Here's a good example of that. This is a song called My Wave from their 94 album, Super Unknown. So I mentioned those odd guitar tunings. They would often combine those with really heavy, sludgy sounds. Here's author Greg Prado again talking about a song that illustrates that.
Probably my favorite Soundgarden song of all time is a song called 4th of July off the Super Unknown album. It's one of the heaviest songs I've ever heard. The guitar sound is just so heavy. It creates such a mood. It's definitely their darkest song.
So I will say Super Unknown is my favorite record of theirs. It also does have their biggest hits like Black Hole Sun and Spoon Man. The band actually won 2 Grammys for those songs, Best Hard Rock Performance, Best Metal Performance. The interesting thing about Soundgarden is that they had broken into the mainstream a little bit in 91 with Bad Motorfinger, but they flew under the radar to some extent compared to, say, Nirvana and Pearl Jam. But in 94 with Super Unknown, they became one of the biggest rock bands in the world.
Yeah. What happened after that, Andy?
So they put another record out in 96 called Down on the Upside. Really, really good, kind of underrated, less heavy than their previous work. It almost kind of has this neo-psychedelic feel to it.
Seems to break me, no matter how far I fall.
But a year later, they broke up, and they remained broken up for quite a long time. Then in 2010, they reformed. They started touring again. They actually put out a record in 2012. That would be their final record to date. And when I was talking to author Greg Prado, who wrote the Soundgarden biography, he said something that really resonated with me. It's this idea that bands like Soundgarden have a real timeless quality about them.
A lot of the early 90s alternative rock bands, especially Soundgarden, their productions had more to do with the 70s, meaning that it was the sound of a live band playing together in a room. Specifically, their Super Unknown album sounds like that to me. So that's a very timeless sound.
I may be biased, Trish, because I grew up here in Seattle in the 90s. Grunge is sort of in my DNA, but I really agree with that. I think many years from now, some popular music will be mostly forgotten, but I think bands like Soundgarden will live on.
All right, well, let's talk about timing because Soundgarden formed, like you mentioned, in the mid-'80s. It's now 2025. I have seen some commentary that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was long overdue.
I think it was. I mean, they had been nominated twice before, didn't make the cut. I think fans of the band don't need the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame stamp of approval, but it is an honor and it can help open them up to younger generations of fans. Here's author Greg Prado again.
I am very glad to see that Soundgarden is in there. Much deserved. Again, they should have been in there before Nirvana, before Pearl Jam. They should have been the first grunge band in there.
All right. Well, Andy, like you mentioned, fans didn't need the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame nomination to confirm what they already knew to be true. Before I let you go, what else do you think people should know?
Yeah, so when I was talking with Marco Collins, the former DJ here at 107.7 The End, he told me a really awesome story about Chris Cornell. Marco has been clean and sober now for 8 years. But before he got sober, this was many years ago, he had a radio show in Los Angeles. Chris Cornell had come in to perform on Marco's show. And at that time, Cornell had been sober for many years. Marco told me when Chris saw him in the green room that day, he could just tell that Marco was not okay. And he was struggling with addiction. And Chris then closed the green room door.
And he's like, I'm going to give you a couple numbers. I want you to call them as soon as we're done with our session. They will come and pick you up and take you to a meeting. These are the kind of guys you need to be in touch with here in LA. Every time you come to town, you need to call these guys, let them know what's up. They'll come get you. They will take care of things. It was such a touching moment for me because he was doing it for the right reasons. And he was giving back, man. He was giving back, and he legit tried to help me stay clean.
So Marco was at the Soundgarden Hall of Fame ceremony over the weekend down in LA, and he told that story to Chris Cornell's daughter when he was there, and Marco told me that she was really touched by it. One more thing before we go, a final Soundgarden album is coming. The band is planning to release some music that was recorded with Chris Cornell before his death. We don't have a release date yet, but that is in the works.
All right. Well, we will definitely look forward to that. Andy Hurst, Seattle Now senior producer, 90s grunge kid. Thanks for bringing it home for us today.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Appreciate you listening to Seattle Now. Today's episode was produced and reported by Andy Hurst. It was edited by Caroline Chamberlain Gomez. Our production team also includes Vaughn Jones, Brooklyn Jamerson Flowers, and Paige Browning. Greg Kramer does our theme music. Seattle Now and KUOW Public Radio are members of the NPR network. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you soon.